I found out the truth on a Thursday evening. The kind of evening that feels too quiet to carry something devastating. The pharmacy had just closed, the last customer's footsteps still echoing in my mind, and I was sitting alone in my studio apartment, letting the hum of the refrigerator fill the silence I thought I needed. My name is Maya Lawson. I'm 27 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that loyalty was something you proved, not something you received. But that night, the proof broke. I remember opening my phone to check a message from my coworker, and instead, my screen lit up with a notification from my younger sister's iCloud, a shared folder that synced by mistake. A banner previewed the first image. Family chat, no Maya. It was an accident, a glitch, one of those digital slips the universe uses when it's tired of you being naive. I should have looked away. I should have respected a boundary I never agreed to. But the truth was already sitting with me, waiting. Before I continue my story, let me ask you something. If you saw your family plotting in secret behind your back, after all the years of trust, would you confront them immediately? Or quietly watch what they say next? Share your honest opinion in the comments. I truly want to hear your perspective. When I clicked into the screenshots, I felt something inside me still. Not break, not shatter, but still. A deep, deliberate quiet. Like my mind was giving me space to witness what came next. The group chat was full of familiar names. My mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my uncle. The people I'd carried groceries for, driven to appointments for, covered shifts for. The people I thought I was safe with. And then I saw the message that ended the version of me they depended on. We just need to make sure Maya isn't included when Mom finalizes the will. She won't fight it. She never does. The words didn't stab. They settled. Heavy. Cold. Factual. As if my family had simply said out loud what they had believed for years. My grandmother, the only person who ever saw me without expectation, had trusted me. I had sat by her bedside through fevers, memory lapses, and long nights when she couldn't sleep. I brushed her hair because she said it made her feel young again. I cooked for her when no one else showed up. She used to tell me, Maya, love is proven in the small hours. So I stared at my phone, absorbing every minute detail. The laughing emojis, the casual tone, the confidence that I would stay silent forever. Silence had always been my refuge. I didn't realize until that moment it would become my strategy. But before the strategy came the unraveling. Before the unraveling, the truth. And before the truth, there was this. The night I learned, my family had already written me out of their future.
Here at Revenge Bible, we explore real psychological stories of betrayal and justice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our next emotional reckoning.
Before everything collapsed, my life was quiet, in the kind of way most people overlooked. I woke up at 6:15 every morning, long before the city fully stretched itself awake, and I'd make the same simple breakfast: toast, a boiled egg, and a cup of green tea. I liked the predictability. I liked the calm. Working as a pharmacy assistant meant spending my days organizing medication, talking to regulars, and answering questions that always sounded urgent, even when they weren't. It wasn't glamorous, but it made sense to me. It felt like I was a small part of someone's stability, and stability mattered more than anything else. My grandmother was the only one who truly understood that part of me. Everyone else in my family was loud, dramatic, or endlessly demanding. Grandma Eloise, on the other hand, moved through life with a quiet dignity that didn't require an audience. She used to say, "Maya, peace is expensive. Protect it like treasure." I didn't realize then that she meant it literally and figuratively. Growing up in the Lawson household was like living on a stage where I was permanently cast as the supporting character. My mother, Denise, filled every room she entered with her opinions, her grievances, and her endless belief that she was the glue holding us together. My father, Carl, was quieter, but his silence wasn't gentle the way mine was. His silence was selective, strategic, a shield he used whenever responsibility came too close. My siblings absorbed their personalities like hand-me-down clothes. Jason, the eldest, carried entitlement like a birthright. Emily, the youngest, learned early that manipulation was easier than honesty. I spent years playing the role of mediator, helper, errand runner. If something needed doing, someone would say, "Ask Maya." I never complained. Part of me thought that giving quietly meant that I would eventually earn my place in their hearts. Another part feared what would happen if I stopped. So I kept giving. Holidays, weekends, sick days, my time belonged to them. My grandmother was the exception. When she began having memory lapses and needed someone to stay overnight, I volunteered without hesitation. Not because someone asked, but because she had always been the one person who spoke to me like my thoughts mattered. I would make her chamomile tea and sit by her bed as she drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes she'd reach out for my hand and whisper, "Thank you for being here, Maya. You always show up." Those words meant more to me than anything my parents ever offered. During those nights, I began writing in my journal. What started as a way to track Grandma's symptoms slowly became a place where I stored thoughts I didn't say out loud, reflections, doubts, small victories, and smaller heartbreaks. I didn't realize it then, but those journals would eventually become the spine of my resolve. In my family, showing up wasn't appreciated, it was expected. When Grandma's health declined further, they rarely visited unless there was a holiday photo opportunity or a chance to look dutiful in front of neighbors. I remember watching my mother fuss with her hair in the hallway before stepping into Grandma's bedroom, practicing a sympathetic expression she could maintain long enough for a conversation. I remember Jason checking his watch every 10 minutes. I remember Emily posting a picture on social media with the caption, "Family first," even though she stayed long enough to take it. But Grandma knew. She wasn't oblivious. There were moments, small ones, where she'd whisper things like, "People show you who they are when they think you're not paying attention." I didn't ask who she meant. Some truths you recognize without needing names. After she passed, a strange stillness settled over the family. I had expected grief to bring us closer, at least temporarily, but instead it highlighted our distance. My mother immediately shifted into logistical mode, talking about the house, the belongings, the bank accounts. My father started making suggestions about fair distribution, though his definition of fairness never included me. Jason started acting like the executor, even though no one had given him that role. Emily floated through the conversation, offering emotional commentary without substance. I stayed quiet, partly because I was processing my own grief, and partly because I'd learned long ago that speaking too soon in my family only made things worse. I thought I understood my place among them, unappreciated but necessary, invisible but reliable, a background character in their story. What I didn't know then was how deeply they believed that, how fully they had written me out of their future, how effortlessly they assumed I would accept whatever scraps they decided I deserved. Looking back now, it's almost startling how normal those days felt, how unaware I was of the storm quietly forming around me. I went to work, I cooked simple dinners, I wrote in my journal, I visited Grandma's empty house just to sit in her old chair. Those were the days before discovery, before betrayal hardened into clarity, before silence became strategy, and before I realized the people who raised me never truly saw me at all.
The betrayal didn't arrive with lightning, shouting, or confrontation. It came quietly, the way winter settles into a room before anyone notices the cold. For a long time, I believed betrayal required intention, a deliberate act. But I learned that the deepest betrayals are born from ease, how effortlessly people can choose themselves over you, how carelessly they can erase you when they think no one is watching. It started 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral. My mother invited everyone to the house for what she called a family alignment meeting. Those words should have warned me, but I didn't question them. I showed up early, as usual, bringing pastries no one asked for, but everyone would eat. When I walked into the living room, the only person who acknowledged me was my uncle, offering a brief nod before returning to whatever conversation they had paused when I arrived. Everyone else sat clustered together, bodies angled toward one another like a closed circle. I took a seat on the armchair near the window, an unclaimed space, a familiar distance. My mother stood with her back straight, her hands folded in front of her like she was hosting a seminar, instead of discussing her own mother's legacy. "We need to talk about Mom's assets," she said, her voice clipped, efficient. "The house, the savings, and the belongings of value." Jason leaned back, his arms crossed, as if preparing to negotiate a business deal. Emily scrolled on her phone, pretending to listen. My father sat with the posture of a man who wanted credit for attending. I waited for someone to mention Grandma's wishes, the nights I stayed with her, the care I gave. I waited for my name. It didn't come. Instead, my mother spoke as if she was reading from a script. The house should go to someone responsible, someone capable of maintaining it, someone who can represent the family properly. My father nodded. "Jason makes the most sense." Jason didn't protest. He smiled. The kind of satisfied smile that made something inside me sink. No hesitation, no humility, just assumption. "And Mom's savings?" my uncle asked. "Split between the 3 kids, well, between Jason and Emily. They have more financial needs than Maya." My name dropped into the conversation like an afterthought, a footnote, a clerical note attached to a file no one intended to keep. I opened my mouth slightly, not to argue, but out of instinct, the way you flinch when something flies toward your face. But then my mother added, "Maya's life is simple. She doesn't carry the same burdens as the rest of us." My burdens, my responsibilities, my sacrifices reduced to nothing in a sentence.
I felt something tightening my chest. Not pain, not anger, something quieter. Recognition. A kind of emotional déjà vu. I had felt this before in smaller moments, overlooked explanations, forgotten thank yous. This was the accumulated weight of every time I had been easy to disregard. Emily finally looked up from her phone. Yeah, I mean, Maya doesn't really need much. She's stable. She said stable the way someone might describe a retired pet. I looked at each of them, searching for even a flicker of hesitation, a hint of shame, a sign that someone might say, wait, this isn't right. No one did. My uncle shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Silence is a kind of participation, too. My mother clasped her hands together, so we're all aligned? Aligned. As if they had been planning this long before the meeting. As if I had been the only one unaware of my role. Something warm rushed to my face, but I stayed still. Stillness is my oldest instinct. It protects me from reacting too quickly, revealing too much. While they continued discussing logistics, renovations for the house, possible tenants, moving dates, I drifted inward. I wasn't hurt because they left me out of the inheritance. I was hurt because they were so comfortable doing it. Because it was natural to them, because it was expected. My father cleared his throat. Maya, you look quiet. You're fine with all this? The phrasing struck me. Not, do you think this is fair? Not, what do you want? Just a prompt to confirm the role they had assigned me. I swallowed. Did Grandma say anything to you about what she wanted? My mother shot me a look sharp enough to cut. She trusted us to make the right decisions. It was a strange answer, too quick, too defensive, but I accepted it in the moment because I didn't understand the layers beneath it. The meeting ended with discussions about sorting belongings next weekend. Everyone stood, stretching, chatting, making casual plans. No one looked at me directly, not even out of politeness. As I walked to my car, the air felt colder than earlier, though the sun was still out. I sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. I watched the house through the windshield. The house where I had made tea for Grandma, where I had listened to her stories, where I had stayed awake while everyone else slept. A thought formed slowly, then settled with certainty. They didn't just leave me out of the inheritance, they left me out of the family. And somehow, they expected me to accept it quietly. They believed I always would. But they didn't know what else I had seen. What else I would soon discover, and what that discovery would turn me into.
After the alignment meeting, I went home feeling hollowed out, as if something essential had been scooped from me. I didn't cry, I didn't rant, I didn't even write in my journal that night. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, replaying every moment from the meeting like a film that refused to end. For 2 days, I moved through life on autopilot. Work felt blurry, conversations felt distant, and even the familiar routines that usually comforted me felt muted. The world was continuing as if nothing had changed, yet inside me, something had shifted. Something subtle, quiet, but irreversible. On the third night, I opened my phone intending to check my calendar. That's when I saw it again. The small cloud icon next to a folder I didn't remember syncing. It was faint, barely noticeable, but something made me tap it. Maybe instinct, maybe curiosity, maybe the lingering ache of being dismissed so casually. The folder opened to a grid of images, screenshots, messages, photos of chat threads. And then I saw the title at the top. Family Chat. No Maya. At first, I stared without breathing. My mind tried to protect me, offering explanations. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But the first screenshot erased all those hopeful lies. It was a message from my sister, Emily, sent a month before Grandma passed. We need to finalize what we discussed before the will gets updated. If Maya finds out, she'll make this complicated. I felt a slow, steady chill crawl through me. My eyes scanned line after line, each message sharp and unfiltered. They weren't debating my involvement. They weren't struggling with the ethics of excluding me. They were planning it. My mother had written, "Mom is sentimental about Maya. We need to guide her decisions while she's still lucid." Guide her decisions. The phrasing was careful, deliberate, polished in a way that revealed its true intention. My father added another message. "Maya always folds when pushed. Don't worry about her." I read that line 3 times. Not because I was shocked, but because the casual confidence in his words felt like a confirmation of something I had sensed for years. Then came the one that finally cracked my composure. A message from Jason. "Honestly, she's better off without the responsibility. She doesn't have the ambition to handle property. Let's keep this clean." Clean. That word burned, as if removing me was an act of tidiness rather than betrayal. The messages continued, each one layering a new weight on my chest. They discussed the house, the savings, the timeline, even rehearsed how they would explain it to me in a way that sounded reasonable. They never once considered what Grandma herself wanted. They never mentioned my caregiving, my presence, my sacrifices. But then I reached something unexpected. An audio file. A short one, the kind that gets sent when someone accidentally hits the microphone icon. I pressed play, hesitating only for a moment. It was my mother's voice, sharp and unguarded. "Just make sure she doesn't see anything. Maya reads into everything. It's better she stays in the dark." A pause. Then Jason's voice. "She's basically in the dark already." They laughed. A soft, lazy laugh. Not cruel in the theatrical sense. Worse. Thoughtless. I set my phone down slowly, as though the device were suddenly fragile. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the streetlights flickering against the pavement. My mind didn't race. It aligned, like pieces shifting quietly into place. The meeting wasn't where the betrayal began. It was merely the performance of a decision they had already made. They had been positioning, influencing, manipulating for months, maybe years, and I had never noticed because I had been too busy filling the role they needed. Dependable, silent, accommodating. I exhaled, long and controlled. Something inside me steadied. This was clarity. Not the kind that crashes into you, but the kind that rises slowly like dawn. I returned to my phone and scrolled further. That's when I found the second folder. It wasn't obvious at first, an accidentally synced album buried beneath others. When I opened it, I saw photos of documents, drafts, notes in my mother's handwriting, a list titled "Talking Points for Eloise," my grandmother's name written as if she were a project to be managed. One note stood out, written in my mother's precise script: "Avoid discussing caregiving, too emotional." My breath caught, not in shock, but in recognition. They had wiped me from the narrative because it was inconvenient. As I absorbed the final screenshot, a message from Emily saying, "As long as she doesn't look too closely, we're fine," I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not despair, not even betrayal. A quiet, controlled resolve. I understood now. They weren't malicious masterminds. They were simply confident I would never see the truth. confident I would remain the person they had always relied on. Silent, soft, accommodating. They depended on my passivity. They were certain of it, and certainty can be a fatal flaw. I closed the folder, opened my journal, and finally picked up my pen. That night, for the first time in my life, I wrote not to understand my pain, but to record my clarity, to build the first trace of a plan. The truth wasn't just something I had discovered. It was something I was ready to use.
I've always believed that revenge, real revenge, the kind that reshapes the landscape of a person's life, is never loud. It's never rushed. It's a quiet thing, a seed planted in darkness long before anyone notices the ground starting to move. So I didn't storm into my parents' house or confront my cousins in a screaming match. I didn't expose the group chat instantly or forward it to Grandma out of panic. No. If they wanted to be strategic, I would be surgical. If they wanted to outmaneuver me, I would outclass them. And if they wanted to inherit everything while treating me as disposable, I would make sure their own tactics collapsed on top of them. The moment Olivia finished reading the last message aloud, the plan started forming, not fully, but like a puzzle clicking into place in slow motion. Grandma's upcoming estate review meeting, the forged narrative they were feeding me about me, their desperation to secure the house, their assumption that I was clueless and compliant, all of it created the perfect setup. But I didn't tell Olivia everything at first. I needed a small team, and I needed each person's involvement to be intentional, not emotional. The first person I called was Mr. Hawthorne, Grandma's longtime attorney, and the one professional my family deeply underestimated. They always assumed he was too old-fashioned, too loyal to her, too ethical to matter, which made him the ideal ally. When he picked up, I didn't fall apart, I didn't accuse. I simply told him I needed clarification on the structure of Grandma's estate and, critically, how decisions were validated. The more he explained, the clearer the battlefield became. Every change in her will required a documented reason. Every claim made about an heir had to be supported. Every meeting was recorded for legal accountability. And Grandma? She had full cognitive capacity according to annual assessments. Meaning, if my family planned to manipulate the will, they would need to fabricate evidence. Meaning further, if I exposed their lies at the right moment, they wouldn't just lose morally, they'd lose legally. The second person I needed was someone who understood human behavior better than lawyers or liars. Grandma's neighbor, Mrs. Ellery, a retired school counselor who saw everything without ever appearing nosy. She had known my family for decades, and more importantly, she adored Grandma. When I visited her the next morning under the guise of bringing her cinnamon rolls, she welcomed me in with that warm, perceptive smile of hers. She listened as I explained carefully, not the betrayal itself yet, but the odd shift in my family's behavior. She didn't pry, but she gave me exactly what I hoped for. Confirmation. Yes, she said, stirring the cup of herbal tea slowly. They've been visiting your grandmother more often. Not lovingly, strategically. They whisper a lot, and when your name comes up, they freeze. That was all the permission I needed to proceed. The third ally was my coworker, Ben, someone the family barely knew existed and therefore could possibly anticipate. He was quiet, meticulous, and brilliant with digital forensics, an essential skill in the age of weaponized screenshots and conveniently lost messages. When I showed him the group chat photos, he didn't gasp or react. He simply nodded, opened his laptop, and said, "Let me verify the metadata. If they try to delete these messages later, you'll need immutable copies." He spent the next hour securing the evidence in multiple formats: PDF with timestamps,
an archive copy on external storage, and even a clean chain of custody written on paper. It looked excessive, but smart revenge often does. At this point, the plan had its skeleton. Confirm their scheme, gather evidence, protect Grandma from manipulation, expose everything at the moment they expected me to be silent. But it needed muscle. It needed timing. It needed elegance. So the final step was understanding what Grandma herself believed and what she hadn't been told. When I visited her that weekend, I didn't bring accusations or screenshots. I didn't burden her. Instead, I asked soft questions about how my family had been lately. She hesitated. She looked down at her knitting needles. Then she told me something that solidified the entire blueprint of my revenge. She said, "They've been saying you're unhappy, that you wouldn't want responsibility if something happened to me, that you prefer distance." She said the word like it hurt her to even shape it. And there it was. The emotional manipulation, the narrative rewriting, the very foundation of their inheritance grab. They weren't just trying to erase me from the will, they were trying to erase my relationship with her entirely. I didn't show her I was angry. I simply placed my hand on hers and said the most honest thing I could. "Grandma, I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." That was all she needed. And all I needed was to let the lie continue, because the more they manipulated her, the deeper they dug their own graves. The plan crystallized fully the moment I learned the date of the estate meeting. Wednesday, 10 a.m. My family would come prepared with their polished lies. They'd expect Grandma to nod along. They'd expect me to stay quiet, maybe smile politely, maybe not even show up. What they didn't expect was that I would arrive with verified digital evidence, legal counsel already briefed, a witness who had seen their manipulation, a grandmother who trusted me more than they realized, and, most importantly, the truth, timed perfectly for maximum impact. This wouldn't be a confrontation. This would be a collapse. A controlled implosion built from their own greed, their own arrogance, and their own assumption that I was too gentle to fight back. They had no idea the storm that was coming.
The morning of the estate meeting felt surreal, like stepping onto a stage I'd been rehearsing for in silence. I woke before my alarm, not out of nerves, but out of purpose. Every piece was in place. Every lie they'd told was documented. Every person I needed was already briefed. I dressed simply, no theatrics, no attempt to look intimidating. I wanted to look exactly like what they believed I was. Quiet, predictable, harmless. Nothing disarmed schemers faster than their own underestimation. When I arrived at Grandma's attorney's office, the waiting room was already filled with my family. My mother perched stiffly on a chair, scrolling her phone as if I were invisible. My father whispered urgently to my older brother Jason. My cousins, Marcus and Lily, looked like they had memorized a script. The moment they saw me walk in, the room's energy shifted just slightly, like someone had opened a window on a cold morning. Mom didn't smile. "Oh, Maya, we didn't think you'd be coming," she said, forcing a surprised tone that fooled no one. I gave a polite smile. I was invited. The way her eyebrow twitched told me everything. They had planned for me not to show up. Good. Let them be caught off guard. We were called in moments later. The conference room felt larger than I remembered, with tall windows and a long table that made every empty space feel meaningful. Grandma sat at one end, serene but alert, her knitting bag beside her, like a silent witness.
Mr. Hawthorne sat beside her, papers neatly arranged. My family took their seats with a rehearsed confidence that made my chest tighten. Not with fear, but with clarity. They really believed their scheme would work. The meeting began like it always did. Updates, legal formalities, polite acknowledgments. My family nodded in all the right places. They were waiting, hungry, ready to slide in their narrative at the perfect moment. It didn't take long. When the discussion shifted to potential estate adjustments, my mother cleared her throat in a way that almost sounded humble. "We've all been talking lately, and we think it may be best to simplify future responsibilities for Mom. Maya has been under a lot of stress, and, well, she's expressed that she doesn't want the burden of anything major." I watched Grandma's face. Her frown was small, but unmistakable. My father chimed in. "Right, we just want fairness. Maya's distance lately has made certain things clear." Then Jason added his line, perfectly rehearsed. "We think it's healthier for everyone if the estate is given to the people who've actually been present." There it was, the reveal, the attempt to cut me out, disguised as concern. Mr. Hawthorne looked at me. "Maya, would you like to respond?" My family expected me to decline, maybe stammer, maybe crumble. Instead, I opened my bag and placed a single folder on the table. "Yes," I said calmly. Mom's chair creaked as she tensed. I started slow. "Before any decisions are made, I think it's important to examine the reasoning behind the proposal." I handed copies to Mr. Hawthorne and Grandma, then slid the rest to the others. They didn't pick them up. Inside were screenshots, clean, time-stamped, authenticated, of every cruel message from the secret group chat. The silence that followed was absolute. Grandma opened the first page, her eyes scanning the words they thought she'd never see. "Maya doesn't deserve anything. She's too soft to notice. Convince Grandma she doesn't want responsibility. Make her seem distant. We need that house. This is our chance." Her lips tightened, slowly. Mom looked at me, her face draining. Why would you do this?" I cut her off gently. "These are your words, not mine." Jason grabbed his copy and began flipping through it, disbelief and panic fighting for dominance. "These could be edited." Mr. Hawthorne cleared his throat. "They're not." He tapped the margin showing the metadata. "These were verified before the meeting." Dad's voice cracked. "Maya, you're misunderstanding." Grandma set her copy down with a finality that echoed through the room. Her voice, usually soft, was sharp as winter ice. I never thought I'd see the day my own children would plot against their sister and use me to do it. Mom began crying, not from guilt, fear. "We were just trying to protect the family." But Grandma wasn't fooled. "No, you were trying to protect your entitlement." Lily tried to speak, but Grandma raised her hand. "Not another word." Then she turned to me. "Maya, sweetheart, why didn't you tell me sooner?" I swallowed. Because I wanted the truth to reveal itself, not through arguments, but through their own actions. Mr. Hoffer nodded approvingly. My family sat frozen, humiliated, not by anything I had done, but by the mirror they were forced to look into. And then came the moment they never saw coming. Grandma took out a revised document from her knitting bag. I had a feeling something was wrong, so I made adjustments last week. My mother's breath hitched. Grandma handed the document to Mr. Hawthorne, who read it aloud. Effective immediately, leadership and full authority over the estate and property decisions would go to one person, Maya Lawson. Everything. The house, the assets, the decision-making power. My family collectively crumbled. My mother whispered, "This can't be real." But it was. Grandma reached for my hand. "You've shown integrity when others showed manipulation. You've earned my trust, and my legacy belongs to the one person who won't weaponize it." My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't theatrical. It was simply truth, timing, and exposure. And it shattered them more deeply than rage ever could. My family never expected me to fight. They certainly never expected me to win. But that day, in that conference room, they learned the lesson they'd spent years avoiding. You can't erase someone who knows how to write her own name back into the story.
The meeting ended, and the room emptied, leaving me with a silence that felt like sunlight after a storm. My family left in stunned silence, still processing the collapse they had built so confidently. I stayed behind for a moment, simply breathing. The air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Everything felt heavier, but also cleaner, as if the space itself had been washed by truth. Betrayal has a way of convincing you that your story is over, that the end has been written by someone else, that your place, your voice, your worth no longer matters. But I learned something critical that day. Betrayal is not the end. It is merely a crossroads. It is a mirror reflecting what is hidden, a test of endurance, a map to your own resilience. The people who try to erase you cannot dictate the story's conclusion. You are the author of the chapters yet to come. Revenge, often misunderstood, is not chaos or cruelty. Revenge can be clarity. Revenge can be empowerment. It can transform humiliation into strategy, silence into voice, and invisibility into undeniable presence. Through careful preparation, measured steps, and a steady heart, I turned what could have been despair into a force that demanded recognition. That force did not destroy me. It strengthened me. Every quiet action, every methodical move became a lesson. The power to reclaim your life is not borrowed from others. It comes from your awareness, your courage, and your determination to act with intention. I want anyone watching to understand this. When someone betrays you, you do not have to accept their narrative. Their version of events is limited, biased, and self-serving. What they expect, your silence, your defeat, is often the very fuel you can use to rise stronger. There is immense power in remaining composed, in letting truth and evidence do the work that anger alone cannot accomplish. Justice, psychological and moral, does not require brutality. It requires foresight, patience, and courage, the kind of courage that lives quietly, like a flame that no wind can snuff out. Maya Lawson, the young woman who once moved through her family's chaos silently, emerged from this storm with clarity and strength. She reclaimed what was hers, not just the house, not just the inheritance,
but her dignity, her voice, and her trust in herself. Today, she is thriving. She has refocused her energy on work, community, and personal growth. She journals every day, not only to record memories, but to reaffirm the lessons of patience, strategy, and self-respect. She has become the author of her own story, unapologetic, resilient, and unshakable. If you feel betrayed, overlooked, or powerless right now, remember, the end is not what someone else dictates. The end is what you choose to make it. Reclaim your voice. Observe, strategize, and act with integrity. Let your quiet strength become the most profound form of revenge. Like Maya, you can come back from anything. And when you do, you will emerge stronger, wiser, and more powerful than they ever imagined. This was another story from Revenge Bible, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Subscribe and join us for the next transformation.